Hello and welcome back to 4FS Gaming. Since its release, I've been playing a lot of Star Wars Squadrons. I smashed out the campaign on Ace, and then I dove straight into the dogfighting and fleet battles game modes. Over the past few days, I feel that I've been picking up the mechanics pretty well, I've done my research, and I've come up with some things that new players, well I suppose that's everyone at the moment, should really know in order to fly and fight well. So let's look at my top 10 tips for dominating the opposition. Number 1 is very simple, but many people fail to do it. It makes them very easy targets to eliminate, and that is that you need to consistently adjust your throttle when fighting. Moving fast makes you harder to hit, it helps you get into good positions faster, so as a default position, full throttle is great. But when you need to turn, half throttle is the way to go. When looping around someone in dogfights, you want throttle set to half, same as when taking tight turns around obstacles. To this end, you should fly fast, reduce throttle to turn, and then increase it again. Many players seem to stay at full or half throttle constantly, and it makes them very easy to outmaneuver. Then there are those players that stop dead in space by reducing the throttle to 0, and this has some tactical uses like blasting at capital ship systems or having a pursuing enemy fly past you, but it is really niche, and usually it just makes you a sitting duck to get blasted away. So manage your throttle, it will help a lot. Tip number 2 is associated with power management. You should always have a system fully powered. Balancing power is really a waste, as each system only gets its overcharge ramped up when it has full power put into it. If you need to maneuver, charge your engines. If you need to fire, or are planning to fire soon, charge up your weapons so you get that nice overcharge. If you're preparing for an attack run, make sure those shields are overcharged to the max. The overcharge for weapons and shields can be built up very quickly, and it decays when unpowered a lot more slowly. This means that by rotating which system has full power, you can overcharge your shields and your weapons, and also have a little bit of boost for whenever you need it. This is much better than balanced power distribution, which gives you absolutely 0 overcharge bonuses. Tip 3 is a trick that Imperial ships can use since they have no shields, except for the TIE Reaper of course. Instead of shield management, TIEs are able to shunt power from weapons to engines and vice versa. This is instantaneous and extremely powerful. When using a TIE, I always put full power to engines. This gives me super mobility and I always have boost and drift available. And then you just shunt across power to weapons when you need firepower. It almost acts like a reload function. Note that you never actually take any pips out of the engine system. It just acts like a battery that you can pull from when you shunt power into your guns. When you do this, you have instant access to overcharged weapons, and you always have access to boost, and your default speed and mobility is much higher than normal. Tip 4 is specific to fleet battles, and that is to know your capital ship subsystem locations. The key to winning fleet battles is taking out those capital ship systems to make destroying it far more easy. Both ships have 2 shield generators, which if removed mean you can then attack the ship from far away and don't have to get under its shield, which is much safer. They also have a targeting system that when destroyed makes the turbo lasers much less threatening, and a power system which if destroyed shows weak points on the hull. And here is a diagram showing where each of these systems can be found. It's important that you know this so you can target and destroy them. Let's go on to tip number 5, which is you should be using advanced power management. Now this is a setting that takes a few matches to get used to, but it is well worth it. It allows you to micromanage how many pips you apply to each system, but much more importantly, it allows you to fully remove power from a system to give more power to a secondary system. This is much more relevant on New Republic ships, as TIEs can just use their power shunting to make pip management absolutely redundant. Normally when you fully power a system, there are 2 pips left in each of the other systems. However, with advanced power management, you can fully power a system and then fully power a second system. The first system you powered will be reduced to 4 pips, which is the same as if you had balanced distribution, and the system you haven't touched at all will now have no pips. It will be completely unpowered. Now I find this incredibly useful. For example, with the A-Wing, I power shields to full until they are overcharged, and then I cycle power through the engines and then into weapons. I will then have full weapon power and 4 pips in engines, giving me standard mobility but a heap of firepower. I don't need any power in shields unless I take damage because they're already charged. And if I find a hard target, I can dump power back into engines and still have decent firepower, but I can move better, and if I get into trouble and I need to escape, I can then put 4 pips into shield and full into engine or vice versa, and none in weapons because when I'm trying to get away from a target, weapons just aren't useful, so any pips that I would have had in that are completely wasted. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but it's well worth getting used to. Let's go to tip number 6. Use your boost. Drifting isn't really an advanced tactic, it's a reasonably basic maneuver that is well worth practicing, and it's going to help you out a lot, especially if you're in a slower craft getting chased down by interceptors. To drift, you need to have the boost charged, either by putting full power to engines or passively accumulating boost through slam engines you can get on some ships, which are amazing, by the way. Basically, you initiate boost, you swing your yaw or pitch control in the direction that you want to turn, and then you hold or tap the boost button depending on your control setups. This will initiate a very sharp turn, you can even do a complete 180. Now this is great for escaping or pursuing a target around cover, but my favourite application of this is turning a death loop into a joust when you're using a bomber. Watch this as I am chased by a more agile opponent. I boost out to a 180 drift and use my frontal shield and superior firepower to win a head-on engagement. Tip number 7. Avoid using assisted targeting weapons. Some weapons have an auto-aim feature, which means you can be less accurate and still land hits. Now these weapons are okay if you're really struggling to aim and just can't play otherwise. But they have two glaring drawbacks. Firstly, their damage is much lower than the non-targeting versions. And secondly, if you use these, your aim's not going to improve at all, and you're still going to struggle to anticipate and track enemy movement if you want to use something else later. I'd avoid using them if possible, it's going to kind of stymie your development as a player. Let's go to tip number 8, and this one is really important. You should be targeting your attacker first. You can't kill things if you're dead, so your first priority should always be eliminating that ship that is targeting you. By double tapping the cycle target button, you can lock onto the enemy that is shooting at you or currently posing the greatest threat. This should be your priority over chasing that one pesky interceptor or slamming those capital ship shields. Once you have your pursuer targeted, you kind of have 3 options of what to do next. You can evade or outpace them, as you can see what ship they have and how far away they are in your targeting UI. You can also begin to loop around and engage them in a dogfight, or you can press the ping button to alert your allies. And if you're in comms with mates, then they might be able to deal a swift and lethal blow while you are the target of all of the enemy's concentration. This brings me right on to tip number 9, and that is to use your pings. Keeping track of enemy positions is extremely difficult in 3D space where there is no up or down. Normally in competitive team games, all kinds of callouts are used, but they are difficult to track and provide accurately when spinning through space. The fact that you can ping a target and then teammates can also switch to that target just by double tapping the ping button is amazing. It allows you to call out vulnerable enemies in front of you that you won't be able to finish off for some reason. You can point your team at a bomber that's making a run on your frigate. You can point out to your team that there's an enemy that you've just hit with an ion blast and they're vulnerable. Or you can let your team know that there's a pesky pursuer that you can't shake. Of course, all of this works better with voice comms. Pings can also help your support ship give you support. It is very difficult as a support to track all of the teammates and their health and be in a position to lock on and heal at the right moment. But by using communication wheel and selecting I need help, you can make it easier for support ships to target you with a double tap of their ping button and deliver that much needed healing. And finally we have tip number 10, shield management. This is really important as the New Republic because their ships have squishy hulls. Place power into shields to overcharge them before you get into a fight, and remember to place shields forward or back depending on where fire is coming from. If your shields are fully overcharged, you can place shields forward, and then when they get worn down during a full frontal assault on a frigate, you can place them forward again, and those backed up shields will move to the front, and this essentially means you have like 4 times the normal amount of shields during a frontal assault, and it's incredibly strong. Likewise, you can divert shields backwards during an escape or when you're being pursued. In these instances, having shields in your front where there's no enemies is a complete waste of shields. They could be behind you protecting your hull. If you really want to make an impact, you can't ignore this feature and you have to get used to just flicking it forward, back or recentering as needed. So there are my top 10 tips for starting out in Star Wars Squadrons. Remember, the game is very new and we're all still discovering things. So some of these might turn out better or worse as we learn more about the game and its intricacies. But for now, all of these have really helped me lift my ability to fly, shoot, and communicate. Let us know if you have any other tips in the comments below, and please consider subscribing as we will be releasing more guides and tips for Squadrons in the coming weeks. Thank you very much to our Patreon supporters as usual, and you guys for watching all the way to the end. This is Ascendance from 4FS Gaming.